The rain had been falling for 3 days straight when the black carriage appeared at the end of Willow Lane. Corenza Ashford stood at the parlor window, her fingers pressed against the cold glass, watching the horses stamp and shake water from their manes. The carriage bore no crest that she could see, but everything about it spoke of wealth, the gleaming lacquer despite the mud, the matched grays with their silver bridles, the coachman in livery finer than anything her family had ever owned. She knew before the door opened. She knew the way one knows a storm is coming before the first crack of thunder. Something in her chest went cold and still, like a lake freezing from the center outward. Corenza. Her mother appeared in the doorway, her face pale. "There's a gentleman here to see you. He says it concerns Edmund." Edmund, her fiancé of 8 months. The man who had sailed for India 6 weeks ago with promises of returning wealthy enough to give her everything she deserved. The man whose letters had stopped arriving 2 weeks past. "Show him in," Corenza said, though her voice sounded distant, belonging to someone else entirely. The man who entered their modest parlor seemed too large for the space, not physically, though he was tall, perhaps 6 feet, with shoulders that strained against his perfectly tailored black coat. It was something else. The way he occupied the room, the way the air itself seemed to rearrange around his presence. He was younger than she expected, perhaps 30 or 31, with dark hair swept back from a face that might have been carved from marble. High cheekbones, a strong jaw, eyes the color of winter storms, gray and cold and assessing. There was no warmth in those eyes, no softness, only a calculating intelligence that made her feel suddenly, terribly exposed. "Miss Ashford." He did not bow, did not offer the usual pleasantries. "I am Theron Vane. I served with your fiancé aboard the Meridian." Served with, not sail with. The distinction cut through her like a blade. "Is he dead?" The words left her mouth before she could stop them. Blunt, graceless. Her mother made a small sound of distress, but Corenza could not bring herself to soften the question. She needed to know. She needed it said aloud so she could begin the terrible work of believing it. Something flickered in his gray eyes. Surprise, perhaps, at her directness, or approval. She could not tell which. Yes. No preamble. No gentle preparation, just the single syllable falling between them like a stone into still water. 3 weeks ago, a fever took him off the coast of Ceylon. He was buried at sea. The room tilted. Corenza gripped the back of the nearest chair, her knuckles going white against the worn fabric. Buried at sea. No grave to visit, no body to mourn over. Just Edmund dissolving into the vast indifference of the ocean, becoming salt and memory and nothing more. "I see." Her voice emerged steady, which surprised her. Inside, something was screaming, but the surface held. The surface always held. "Thank you for informing us personally, Mr. Vane. That was considerate." "I am not Mr. Vane." His tone carried a weight that made her look up sharply. "I am the Duke of Ashworth." A duke. A duke had come to their cramped parlor in the unfashionable part of town to deliver news of a dead sailor. The absurdity of it threatened to crack her composure. "Your Grace." She corrected herself automatically, years of her mother's instruction surfacing through the fog of shock. "Forgive me. I was not expecting—" "No." Something shifted in his expression, a hardening, as if he were steeling himself for something. "You were not. And I'm afraid the news of Edmund's death is not the only reason I've come." Corenza's mother stepped forward, her hand finding Corenza's shoulder. The touch was meant to be comforting, but it felt like a warning instead. "Your Grace," her mother said carefully, "perhaps you might allow my daughter a moment to absorb." "There is no time for moments, madam." The Duke's voice cut through the room like cold steel. "What I have to say cannot wait." He reached into his coat and withdrew a folded document, the paper thick and expensive. He held it, but did not yet extend it toward her. Edmund Hale died owing me a considerable sum, £12,000 to be precise. He borrowed against the expectation of his trading venture's success. When that venture failed, and it failed spectacularly, he lost everything, including, I regret to say, this house. The world stopped making sense. Coincidental stared at him, certain she had misheard. This house? That's impossible. This house belongs to my family. My father. Your father mortgaged it to cover your brother's debts 3 years ago. Edmund purchased the mortgage as part of his financial arrangements before sailing. He intended to settle the matter upon his return. The Duke's expression remained impassive. Unfortunately, he will not be returning. Coincidental's mother swayed slightly. You cannot mean. The debt passes to his estate. Edmund had no estate, which means the debt now falls to his guarantor. Those cold gray eyes fixed on Coincidental with terrible precision. You, Miss Ashford. Edmund named you as guarantor for his loan. I never signed anything. Coincidental's voice rose despite herself. I would remember. The night before he sailed. You dined together at the Ashford Inn. He asked you to sign several documents regarding his trading company. You trusted him. You did not read what you were signing. The memory surfaced with sickening clarity. Edmund's smile across the candlelit table. The stack of papers he had pushed toward her with casual confidence. Her signature, given freely because she had loved him, because she had believed. No. The word came out as a whisper. No, this cannot be right. It is entirely right, and it is entirely legal. The Duke stepped closer, and Coincidental caught the scent of him, cedar and something darker, sandalwood perhaps, and beneath it the sharp, clean smell of rain. In 3 weeks, this house will be seized to cover the debt. Your family will be turned out. Your mother will have nothing. Your brother. He paused, a flicker of something crossing his face. Your brother Phineas will likely face debtor's prison for his own outstanding obligations, which Edmund was also covering. The room was spinning. Coincidental gripped the chair harder, willing herself not to collapse, not to give him the satisfaction of seeing her break. Why are you telling me this? Her voice had gone hollow. If you've come to gloat, I've come to offer you a solution. The words hung in the air between them, strange and impossible. What solution could possibly exist for this? The Duke held her gaze. Something shifted in those winter storm eyes, something she could not name. Marry me. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the rain seemed to pause against the windows, holding its breath. I beg your pardon. Marry me, Miss Ashford. Become my Duchess. In exchange, I will forgive Edmund's debt entirely. Your family will keep this house. Your brother will be freed from his obligations. Your mother will be provided for, permanently. Coincidental stared at him, searching his face for mockery, for madness, for any explanation that made sense. She found nothing but that same cold calculation. You don't know me, she managed finally. We met 5 minutes ago. You came to tell me my fiancé is dead, and now you're proposing marriage? I am proposing an arrangement. His voice was precise, clinical, one that benefits us both. How could marrying a complete stranger possibly benefit you? Something dark flickered across his features, a crack in the marble facade, there and gone so quickly she might have imagined it. That, he said quietly, is a conversation for another time. For now, all you need to know is that I require a wife before the season ends. You require salvation. The mathematics are simple. Coincidental's mother had gone pale as milk. Her hand trembled against Coincidental's shoulder. This is madness, Coincidental breathed. I cannot simply... You have 3 days to decide. The Duke placed the folded document on the side table beside him. After that, The debt collectors will begin their work. I cannot stop what happens next." He turned toward the door, then paused, his hand on the frame. "One more thing, Miss Ashford. Whatever you decide, tell no one of this proposal. Not your brother. Not your friends. No one." His eyes met hers one final time, and she saw something there that made her blood run cold. "There are people who mustn't know what I am planning. If word spreads, this offer disappears, and your family's ruin becomes permanent." Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft click that sounded like the ceiling of a tomb. Coincidental stood frozen, staring at the document he had left behind, her dead fiancé's betrayal still burning in her chest, while a stranger's impossible proposal echoed through her mind. 3 days to decide. 3 days to choose between ruin and a marriage to a man whose eyes held secrets dark enough to drown in. The document told her everything and nothing. Coincidental sat at the kitchen table long after her mother had retreated to bed, the single candle burning low as she read and reread the papers the Duke had left behind. Edmund's signature. Her own signature, barely recognizable, scrawled in haste on a night she remembered as romantic and now understood as ruinous. Figures that made her head swim. £12,000, a fortune, a lifetime of debt, and at the bottom, a single line that made her stomach turn. In the event of default, all obligations transfer to the undersigned guarantor. She had signed her own destruction without ever knowing it. "You should sleep." Coincidental looked up to find her brother Phineas standing in the doorway, his coat still damp from wherever he had been all evening. He was 3 years her elder, with the same dark hair and green eyes that marked all the Ashford children. But where Coincidental had learned to hold herself still and contained, Phineas had always been restless, always chasing, always believing the next venture would be the one to restore their family's fortunes. "Where were you?" she asked, not answering his suggestion. "Does it matter?" He slumped into the chair across from her, rubbing his face with both hands. "I heard about Edmund. Gideon Croft told me at the tavern. Said a fine carriage had been seen outside our house. Said there were rumors already spreading." Rumors. Of course there were rumors. Nothing stayed secret in their neighborhood. A duke's carriage in Willow Lane was the sort of event people would discuss for months. "What kind of rumors?" Phineas hesitated. "That Edmund died owing money. That we're involved somehow. That—" He stopped, his eyes falling to the papers spread across the table. "Coincidental, what is all this?" She should lie. The Duke had warned her to tell no one, but Phineas was family, and he deserved to know what Edmund had done to them. "Edmund borrowed £12,000 before he sailed," she said quietly. "Against the house, against everything. He made me sign as guarantor without telling me what I was signing, and now he's dead, and the debt falls to us." The color drained from her brother's face. 12,000? That's impossible. No one would lend. The Duke of Ashworth would. Coincidental watched her brother's expression shift from disbelief to horror. "Edmund borrowed from a duke, Phineas, and now that duke owns our lives." "A duke?" Phineas laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Edmund borrowed from a duke. Of course he did. The fool. The absolute fool. You introduced them." The words hung between them like smoke. Phineas went still. "What?" "Edmund told me. Last year, before he proposed. He said you had introduced him to a nobleman who might invest in his trading venture. Someone you had met through your business dealings." Coincidental's voice hardened despite herself. "Was that the Duke of Ashworth?" Phineas opened his mouth, closed it, and then looked away. The silence was confession enough. "Phineas." Coincidental's hands clenched around the papers. "What were you involved in? What kind of dealings connect you to a duke?" "Nothing illegal," but his voice wavered. "Just opportunities, investments. Gideon Croft knows people, important people. He connected me to some gentlemen who were looking for partners in various ventures, and sometimes those gentlemen move in elevated circles. Elevated circles that now own our house. I didn't know Edmund would borrow from the Duke. Phineas's voice rose, then dropped just as quickly. I didn't know he would be reckless enough to— To what? To do exactly what you've been doing for years? Coincidental stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. Chasing schemes, borrowing against futures that never arrive. How much do you owe, Phineas? How much debt did Edmund cover for you? Her brother's silence was damning. Tell me. 4,000. The words came out strangled. I owed 4,000 to various creditors. Edmund said he would handle it as part of his trading venture. When he returned successful, everything would be settled. The house would be free. Our debts would be clear. We would finally— His voice broke. I believed him, Coincidental. I believed it would work. 4,000 plus 12,000. 16,000 pounds of debt bearing down on a family that had not seen 100 pounds together in years. The mathematics were indeed simple, as the Duke had said. Simple and devastating. The Duke told me I have 3 days to respond to his terms, Coincidental said, her voice flat. After that, the collectors come. The house is seized, and you go to debtor's prison. Phineas's head snapped up. What terms? What did he offer? Tell no one. The Duke's warning echoed in her mind. There are people who must not know what I am planning. But Phineas was already in this disaster up to his neck. If she did not tell him something, he would ask questions. He would investigate. He would make things worse. He offered to forgive the debt, she said carefully. All of it, in exchange for certain services. What kind of services? Phineas's eyes narrowed with sudden suspicion. Coincidental, what exactly did this man propose to you? Nothing improper. The lie tasted bitter on her tongue. An arrangement, a business transaction. I cannot give you details yet. He was quite insistent on discretion. Discretion, Phineas snorted. A Duke comes to our house, and you think discretion is possible? Half the neighborhood saw that carriage. By tomorrow morning, everyone will be speculating about what the Duke of Ashworth wants with the Ashford family. He was right. The thought made her chest tighten with something close to panic. What do they know about him? She asked. The Duke. What have you learned through your dealings? Phineas hesitated, then leaned forward, lowering his voice, as if the walls themselves might be listening. They say he's been looking for a wife, desperately, urgently, before the season ends. No one knows why. His grandmother has been parading every eligible lady in London before him for months, but he has refused them all. Lady Lavinia Pemberton was considered the front-runner until a fortnight ago, when the Duke cut her publicly at a music hall. Since then, the gossip has been relentless. A wife. Before the season ends. The pieces began arranging themselves in Coincidental's mind, forming a picture she did not yet fully understand. What else? His father died last year. Suddenly, unexpectedly. Some say the Duke hasn't been the same since. Cold where he was, once merely reserved. Ruthless where he was, once simply efficient. Phineas met her eyes. They say he has enemies, Coincidental. Powerful ones. They say someone is working against him, though no one knows who or why. Enemies. Secrets. A desperate need for marriage. And into this storm, he had thrown a proposal at a penniless woman whose fiancé had just died, owing him a fortune. Why me? She murmured, more to herself than to Phineas. He could have any woman in England. Why would he want someone with nothing to offer? Maybe that's exactly what he wants. Phineas's voice dropped further. Someone with nothing. Someone who has no choice but to accept. Someone who cannot afford to refuse his terms, whatever they are. The implication settled over her like ice water. She was not being offered salvation. She was being purchased. I need to think. Coincidental gathered the papers with trembling hands. Go to bed, Phineas, and say nothing of this to anyone. Not to Mother, not to Gideon Croft, not to anyone. Coincidental? Nothing. She fixed him with a look that brooked no argument. If you have ever loved this family, you will keep silent until I decide what to do. Phineas held her gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly and retreated up the narrow stairs. Alone again, Coincidental pressed her palms flat against the table, willing them to stop shaking. 3 days. 3 days to choose between ruin and chains, between poverty and a gilded cage. And beneath it all, a question she could not shake loose. What did the Duke of Ashworth truly want? And what would happen to her when she gave it to him? The candle guttered and died, leaving her in darkness. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled across the city. She sent word the next morning. The note was brief, 3 lines requesting an audience at his earliest convenience. She signed it with nothing but her name, folded it twice, and gave it to the boy who delivered milk, along with a coin she could not afford to spare. The response came before noon. Not a note, not a message. The Duke himself, arriving in that same black carriage, rain still falling, as if the sky had decided never to stop weeping. He found her waiting in the parlor, dressed in her best gray wool, her hair pinned with severe precision. She had sent her mother to visit their aunt across town. She had made certain Phineas was occupied elsewhere. Whatever happened in the next hour, she would face it alone. Miss Ashford. He entered without waiting to be announced, filling the small room once again with his unsettling presence. Today he wore charcoal gray, his cravat perfectly arranged, not a single dark hair out of place. He looked like a man who had never experienced uncertainty in his life. You wish to see me. I wish to ask questions. Coincidental remained standing, though every instinct screamed at her to sit, to diminish herself, to become smaller in the face of his authority. Before I give you my answer, I need to understand what I would be agreeing to. Something flickered in his gray eyes. Approval, perhaps. Or curiosity. Ask. Why me? He tilted his head slightly, as if the question amused him. I told you yesterday, you require salvation. I require a wife. That is not an answer. Coincidental kept her voice steady through sheer force of will. You are a duke. You could marry anyone. Lady Lavinia Pemberton, the daughter of an earl, the daughter of a marquis. Women with dowries and connections, and everything I lack. Why would you choose a penniless widow's daughter, whose fiancé died owing you a fortune? Widow's daughter? My father passed away 4 years ago. She said it flatly, without sentiment. There was no room for sentiment today. My mother has survived on economies and the occasional kindness of distant relations. My brother chases schemes that never succeed. I was engaged to a man who I now understand saw me primarily as a signature on documents he could exploit. I have nothing to offer you, so I ask again, why me? The Duke was silent for a long moment. Rain streaked down the windows behind him, casting strange shadows across his face. Because you have nothing, he said finally. Because you have no powerful family who will demand concessions. No fortune that comes with strings attached. No expectations beyond the arrangement itself. His gaze bore into hers. And because you are intelligent enough to ask questions that other women would not think to ask. That seems a thin basis for marriage. It is an excellent basis for the kind of marriage I require. Coincidental felt her jaw tighten. And what kind is that? A practical one. He moved to the window, presenting her with his profile. In the gray light, he looked almost sculptural, beautiful, and cold as marble. I need a wife before the season ends. The reasons are my own, and I will not share them with you yet. In exchange for becoming my duchess, you will receive everything I promised yesterday. The debts forgiven. The house secured. your family protected. Additionally, you will receive an allowance of £2,000 per year for your personal use, and upon my death, you will inherit a substantial widow's portion that will keep you comfortable for the rest of your life. £2,000 a year, more money than she had ever seen, more than her father had earned in his best years of trading. And what will you expect from me? Publicly, you will be my wife in every way that matters. You will attend social functions at my side. You will manage my household. You will present yourself as a woman devoted to her husband and his interests. He turned back to face her, and something in his expression made her breath catch. Privately, we will maintain separate lives. I will not come to your chambers uninvited. I will make no demands upon your person. This is a marriage of convenience, Miss Ashford, not affection. I expect neither love nor pretense of it. No demands upon your person. The words should have been a relief. Instead, they landed strangely, leaving an odd, hollow feeling in her chest. And if I wish to leave, if the arrangement becomes unbearable, then you leave. His voice held no emotion. After 1 year, if you find the marriage intolerable, I will grant you an annulment. You will retain half your allowance and a modest property in the country. Your family's debts will remain forgiven, regardless of what passes between us. 1 year. She could survive anything for 1 year. And if I refuse entirely, then I walk out this door and never return. He said it simply, as if discussing the weather. The debt collectors arrive in 3 days. Your house is seized. Your brother goes to prison. Your mother ends her days in a charity home. And you, he paused, something flickering across his features. You spend the rest of your life knowing you could have prevented it. The cruelty of the choice settled over her like a shroud. She could see it now, the careful architecture of the trap. He had given her just enough information to feel she was making a decision, while leaving her no real option at all. You are not a kind man, she said quietly. No, he did not deny it. But I am a fair one, and I am offering you more than anyone else in your circumstances has ever been offered. The question is whether you are brave enough to accept. Brave or desperate. Sometimes they looked the same. I have conditions, Coincidental said. His eyebrow rose fractionally. You are negotiating with me. You said yourself I was intelligent enough to ask questions others would not. I am also intelligent enough to protect myself. She lifted her chin, meeting his gaze directly. First, I want a written contract. Everything you have promised, documented and witnessed by a solicitor of my choosing. Agreed. Second, I want my mother provided for separately. A cottage in the country with a small income, entirely in her name. Something that cannot be taken from her, regardless of what happens between us. A pause. Then, slowly, he nodded. Agreed. Third. Coincidental steeled herself. This was the most dangerous request, the one most likely to offend him. I want to know why you truly need a wife before the season ends. Not today, not before the wedding, but eventually, when you deem me trustworthy enough. I want to know what I am walking into. The silence stretched between them, taut as wire. She watched emotions flicker behind his carefully controlled expression. Surprise, calculation, and something else, something that looked almost like respect. You ask for trust, he said finally, before you have given me any reason to extend it. I'm giving you my life, your grace, my freedom, my future. That is trust enough for any reasonable man. Another silence. The rain continued its assault against the windows. Somewhere in the house, a clock ticked away the seconds. Agreed, the Duke said. When I judge the time is right, I will tell you everything. But know this, Miss Ashford. The truth, when it comes, will not be comfortable. You may wish you had never asked. I've learned to survive discomfort, His expression changed subtly, a softening so slight she might have imagined it. "Yes," he murmured. "I believe you have." He extended his hand, not to shake, but palm up, waiting, an invitation. "Do we have an agreement?" Coincidental looked at his hand. Elegant fingers, strong palm. The hand of a man who had never known want, never known desperation, never stood in a cramped parlor watching his world collapse around him. The hand of the man who now owned her future. She placed her palm in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm and firm, sealing a bargain that would change everything. "We have an agreement." His grip tightened momentarily, and something electric passed between them, there and gone, before she could name it. "Good," he said, releasing her hand. "We marry in 1 week. My sister Matilda will call on you tomorrow to discuss arrangements. She is eager to meet you." "Your sister?" "She has been trying to convince me to marry for months." A ghost of something, not quite a smile, crossed his features. "She will be delighted to discover I have finally listened." He moved toward the door, then paused, as he had the day before. "One more thing, Miss Ashford. From this moment forward, you are under my protection. If anyone threatens you, if anyone questions you, if anyone so much as looks at you wrongly, you tell me immediately." His gray eyes held hers with sudden intensity. "There are forces at work that you do not yet understand. Until you do, trust no one outside my household. Not your brother. Not your brother's associates. No one." Before she could respond, he was gone. Coincidental stood alone in the parlor, her hand still tingling where he had held it, her heart racing with something that was not quite fear. She was engaged to a duke. She was saved, and she had absolutely no idea what she had just agreed to. Matilda Vaughn arrived the next morning, like a force of nature wrapped in rose silk. She was nothing like her brother. Where Theron was dark and severe, Matilde was golden, with honey-colored hair piled in artful curls, and eyes the warm brown of autumn leaves. Where he moved with controlled precision, she seemed to dance through doorways, trailing energy and enthusiasm in her wake. "Oh, you're perfect," she declared, before Coincidental could even curtsy properly. "Absolutely perfect." When Theron told me he'd finally found someone, I expected some timid little creature afraid of her own shadow. But you— She grabbed Coincidental's hands, squeezing them with surprising strength. "You have spine. I can see it in your eyes. He needs someone with spine." "Lady Matilda," Coincidental began. "Just Matilda, please. We're to be sisters, after all." Her smile was radiant, infectious. "Now, we have an enormous amount to do, and very little time to do it. The wedding is in 6 days. You'll need an entire wardrobe. We'll need to prepare the household for your arrival. And most importantly, we need to discuss grandmother." The word landed like a stone in still water. Grandmother. Matilda's expression flickered, something complicated passing behind her cheerful facade. "The Dowager Duchess of Ashworth. She lives at Ashworth House with us. She has opinions, strong ones, about everything, but particularly about who Theron should marry." "I see." Coincidental's stomach tightened. "And I am not who she would have chosen. You are not Lady Lavinia Pemberton, which is enough to make you infinitely preferable in my view." Matilda squeezed her hands again. "But grandmother will need convincing. She's protective of Theron, especially since father died. She worries." "About what?" The question hung between them. Matilda's smile faltered, then recovered. "About everything. About nothing. About things I cannot explain yet." She released Coincidental's hands and moved toward the door with sudden briskness. "Come. The carriage is waiting. We have a wedding to plan, and a duchess to forge." Ashworth House was not a house, it was a monument. Coincidental had seen grand homes before, from a distance, through iron gates, in illustrations and books she could not afford to buy. But nothing had prepared her for the reality of standing in the entrance hall of one of London's finest residences, surrounded by marble floors and soaring ceilings and portraits of ancestors who seemed to judge her with painted eyes. "It's overwhelming at first," Matilda said, linking her arm through Corenza's with easy familiarity. "I grew up here, and I still get lost sometimes. But you'll learn. The important rooms are simple enough. The drawing room for receiving guests, the dining room for formal meals, the library for—" She stopped, a knowing smile crossing her face. "The library is Theron's sanctuary. You'll find him there most evenings, buried in account books and correspondence. He works too much. Perhaps you can convince him to stop. I doubt I have that kind of influence. You might be surprised." Matilda led her up a sweeping staircase, past more portraits, past doors that seemed to multiply endlessly. "This will be your suite, the Duchess's chambers." She opened a door, and Corenza's breath caught. The room was enormous. A canopied bed draped in pale blue silk dominated one wall. Windows stretched nearly floor to ceiling, flooding the space with afternoon light. A writing desk sat beside the window, positioned perfectly to catch the sun. A vanity with a gilded mirror. A fireplace with a marble mantel carved with flowers and vines. It was beautiful. It was terrifying. It was nothing like anywhere she had ever belonged. "There's a dressing room through there," Matilda continued, pointing to a door on the left, "and a private sitting room through there. The door on the right connects to Theron's chambers. But don't worry." She caught Corenza's expression and laughed softly. "He's had it locked from his side. He meant what he said about separate lives. You'll have complete privacy. Complete privacy in a gilded cage." "This is too much," Corenza heard herself say. "It's exactly enough." Matilda's voice gentled. "You're going to be a duchess, Corenza, the mistress of 3 estates, the hostess of one of the most prominent households in England. This room is the least of what you'll need to grow accustomed to." 3 estates. Corenza had not considered that, had not considered any of it beyond the immediate salvation of her family. "What have I agreed to?" she whispered, more to herself than to Matilda. "Something terrifying and wonderful." Matilda moved to stand beside her at the window, looking out over the manicured gardens below. "Something that will change everything about your life. But also—" She turned, her brown eyes suddenly serious. "Something that might change my brother's life, too. He's been so cold since Father died. So closed off. I've watched him become a stranger, and I don't know how to reach him anymore. You think I can? I think you're different from anyone he's ever met. And sometimes, different is exactly what's needed." Before Corenza could respond, a sharp knock echoed through the room. "That will be Odette," Matilda said, her cheerful demeanor snapping back into place. "Your new lady's maid. She's wonderful. A bit fierce, but wonderful. She'll help you settle in while I check on the arrangements for dinner." She swept toward the door, then paused, looking back over her shoulder. "Grandmother will join us for dinner tonight. She insisted on meeting you immediately." Matilda's expression held something that looked almost like apology. "Be yourself, Corenza. But perhaps, be a carefully edited version of yourself, at least until she decides whether to become your ally or your enemy." Then she was gone, leaving Corenza alone in the vast blue room with the weight of the evening pressing down upon her. Ally or enemy, as if she had any control over which one the dowager would choose. Odette proved to be exactly as Matilda had described, fierce, efficient, and utterly unflappable. She was perhaps 40, with steel-gray hair pinned beneath a crisp white cap and sharp dark eyes that seemed to see everything. She unpacked the small trunk Corenza had brought, her pitiful collection of worn dresses and patched undergarments, without a single flicker of judgment. "These will do for now," she said briskly, hanging the least threadbare dress in the vast wardrobe, where it looked lonely and lost. Madame Forsyth is coming tomorrow for measurements. You'll have a full wardrobe within the week. That seems very fast. Money moves mountains, miss. Odette's lips twitched in what might have been a smile. And His Grace has made it clear that your wardrobe is the highest priority. His Grace. The Duke, her future husband. The man sleeping somewhere on the other side of a locked door. Has he said anything else? Coincidental asked carefully. About me, I mean. About expectations. Odette paused in her work, studying Coincidental with those penetrating eyes. He said you were brave, she replied finally, and that I was to treat you with the same respect I would show him. Her voice softened almost imperceptibly. His Grace does not say such things lightly, miss. Whatever arrangement exists between you, know that you have his protection. In this house, that counts for everything. It was the kindest thing anyone had said to her since this nightmare began. Thank you, Odette. The older woman nodded briskly, then returned to her work with renewed efficiency. Dinner is at 8. I've laid out the gray silk for tonight. It's the best of what you brought. Tomorrow we'll have better options. She moved toward the door, then paused exactly as Matilda had. One more thing, miss. The Dowager Duchess is not unkind, whatever you may have heard. But she is protective. Fiercely so. She loved the late Duke more than anything in this world, and she sees his shadow in His Grace. What should I do? Odette's face gave nothing away. Tell her the truth. She can smell a lie from across a ballroom. And whatever you do, her voice dropped lower. Do not let her see you're afraid. The door closed behind her with a soft click. Coincidental sank onto the edge of the enormous bed, her hands trembling slightly. Dinner with the Dowager. The woman who held the power to make her life in this house bearable or unbearable. The woman who had apparently been trying to marry Theron to someone else entirely. The woman who would almost certainly see Coincidental as an interloper, a fortune hunter, a common girl playing above her station. Be yourself, but carefully edited. Don't let her see you're afraid. Tell her the truth. The advice contradicted itself at every turn. Coincidental looked at the gray silk dress hanging in the wardrobe, the finest thing she owned, and yet hopelessly inadequate for what was coming. In 4 hours, she would face the Dowager Duchess. In 6 days, she would become a duchess herself, and somewhere in between, she needed to find a way to survive. The dining room could have swallowed Coincidental's entire house. A table long enough to seat 30 stretched down the center of the room, though only 4 places had been set at one end. Crystal chandeliers caught the candlelight and scattered it across the walls in dancing fragments. Silver gleamed. Porcelain glowed. Everything spoke of wealth, so old and assured it had forgotten how to be anything else. Theron stood near the fireplace, dressed in formal black that made him look even more severe than usual. He nodded once as Coincidental entered, his gray eyes sweeping over her with an expression she couldn't decipher. Miss Ashford, you look adequate. High praise from you, I'm sure. The words escaped before she could stop them. Something flickered at the corner of his mouth. Not quite a smile, but close. Matilda swooped in from behind, adjusting a fold of Coincidental's gray silk with sisterly familiarity. Don't listen to him. You look lovely. The gray brings out your eyes. And here I thought it merely emphasized my poverty, Coincidental murmured. This time Theron definitely smiled. Brief, unexpected, gone almost before it registered. You have a sharp tongue, he observed. I've been told it's one of my less endearing qualities. Perhaps. Or perhaps it's precisely what this household needs. Before Coincidental could respond, the doors at the far end of the room opened, and all warmth fled the space. The Dowager Duchess of Ashworth entered like a queen surveying conquered territory. She was older than Coincidental had expected, perhaps 70, but age had done nothing to diminish her presence. Silver hair swept back from a face that must have been beautiful once, and remained striking now, all sharp cheekbones and imperious brow. Her eyes were the same winter gray as Theron's, but colder somehow, as if whatever warmth they had once held had been frozen out long ago. She wore black, severe and unadorned, but she wore it like armor. "So," she said, stopping several feet from where Coincidental stood. "This is the girl, not the woman. Not Miss Ashford. The girl." Coincidental curtsied deeply, holding the position longer than strictly necessary. "Your Grace, it is an honor to meet you." "Is it?" The dowager's voice cut like a blade. "I wonder. Most girls in your position would consider meeting me more of an ordeal than an honor. Most girls in my position have not yet learned that ordeal, and honor are often the same thing." Silence. Coincidental straightened slowly, meeting the dowager's piercing gaze without flinching. Behind her, she sensed, rather than saw, Matilda holding her breath. "Spine," the dowager said finally. "You have spine. Matilda mentioned that." She moved closer, circling Coincidental with the same assessing look the Duke had given her in her family's parlor. "Pretty enough, I suppose. Good posture. Your mother taught you well." "She taught me many things, Your Grace, including how to recognize when I am being evaluated like livestock at market." The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Matilda made a small, strangled sound. Theron went very still. But the dowager laughed. It was a sharp sound, more bark than amusement, but it was unmistakably a laugh. "Livestock," she shook her head slowly. "No one has dared speak to me like that in 20 years. Her eyes narrowed. "Either you are very brave or very foolish, Miss Ashford." "Possibly both, Your Grace. The circumstances have not yet revealed which." Another pause. The dowager's gaze moved to her grandson, who stood like a statue by the fireplace. "You chose this one?" she asked him. "I did. She has no fortune, no family of consequence, no connections whatsoever." "No." Theron's voice remained level. "She has none of those things. Then why?" "Because she has exactly what I need." "And what is that?" The Duke held his grandmother's stare without flinching. "That is between Miss Ashford and myself." For a long moment, the two of them faced each other across the candlelit room, engaged in some silent battle of wills that Coincidental could not fully understand. Then, slowly, the dowager nodded. "Very well." She turned back to Coincidental, her features remaining carefully neutral. "Come, sit beside me at dinner. We have much to discuss." It was not a request. Dinner was an interrogation dressed in silver and crystal. The dowager asked questions with the precision of a surgeon wielding a scalpel. Where was Coincidental's family from? What had her father done? How had he died? What was her education? Could she play piano? Did she speak French? Had she managed a household before? Coincidental answered honestly, as Odette had advised. She spoke of her father's trading business and its collapse, of her mother's quiet strength, of the education her parents had sacrificed to provide, of the skills she had learned from necessity rather than privilege, mending and cooking and stretching pennies until they screamed. She did not mention Edmund, did not mention the debt, did not mention the true nature of her arrangement with Theron. But she suspected the dowager knew anyway. "You understand," the older woman said as dessert was served, "that I opposed this match. I gathered as much, Your Grace. Lady Lavinia Pemberton is the daughter of an earl. Her mother was a Harrington. Her fortune is substantial, her connections impeccable." The dowager's eyes fixed on Coincidental's face. "She would have made an excellent duchess. I'm sure she would have. And yet my grandson refused her, refused every suitable woman I presented to him. And then, out of nowhere, he appears with you." The dowager set down her spoon with deliberate precision. "Tell me why I should accept this." Corenza felt the weight of every eye in the room upon her. Matilda looked worried. Theron's expression remained impossible to read. "Because he chose me," Corenza said quietly. "And whatever his reasons, that choice should mean something. Even to you." Choice. The dowager's voice dripped with something that might have been contempt, or might have been pain. "My son chose for love. He married a woman with nothing but beauty and wit to recommend her. And when she died, he spent 20 years mourning her, refusing to remarry, refusing to secure the succession properly. Choice is not always wisdom, Miss Ashford." "No," Corenza agreed, "but it is not always foolishness either. And without knowing what drives your grandson's choice, you cannot judge which this is." The silence stretched unbearably. Then the dowager rose, and everyone at the table rose with her. "Walk with me," she said to Corenza. "Alone." The gallery was dark, lit only by moonlight streaming through tall windows. The dowager moved slowly past portraits of vain ancestors, her black gown rustling against the marble floor. Corenza followed in silence, waiting. "My husband died 30 years ago," the dowager said finally, stopping before a portrait of a dark-haired man with Theron's cheekbones. "My son died last year. Everything I have done since has been about protecting what remains of this family. I understand. Do you?" The dowager turned, her gray eyes catching the moonlight. "My grandson is in danger, Miss Ashford. There are forces working against him. Forces I cannot fully identify or combat. Someone wants him destroyed. And I do not know why." The words sent a chill down Corenza's spine. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you are about to become part of this family, and that means you are about to become a target as well." The dowager stepped closer, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "I do not know what arrangement exists between you and Theron. I don't know why he chose you above all others. But I know this. If you betray him, if you work against this family in any way, I will destroy you so thoroughly that even your memory will be erased from the earth." The threat hung between them like poison. "And if I don't betray him?" Corenza asked steadily. "If I prove myself loyal?" The dowager studied her for a long moment. "Then you will have an ally more valuable than any fortune or connection." She reached out, her cold fingers briefly touching Corenza's cheek. "I was a nobody once. A baronet's daughter, with nothing but beauty and determination to recommend me. I know what it is to be underestimated, to be dismissed, to be forced to prove yourself again and again." Her hand dropped. "Prove yourself, Miss Ashford. Prove that my grandson's choice was wisdom rather than folly. And perhaps, we can save this family together." She turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the gallery. Corenza stood alone among the painted ancestors, her heart pounding with something that was not quite fear. The dowager had not accepted her, but she had not rejected her either. She had issued a challenge, and Corenza had never been one to back down from a challenge. The days before the wedding blurred together in a whirlwind of preparations. Madame Forsyth arrived with bolts of silk and muslin and velvet, transforming Corenza's borrowed room into a workshop of fabric and pins. Measurements were taken. Colors were debated. Styles were chosen and rejected, and chosen again. "The ivory with gold embroidery for the wedding," the modiste declared, holding up a sample against Corenza's complexion. "Classic, elegant, appropriate for a duchess. And the deep green velvet for the wedding dinner. It will make your eyes luminous." Your eyes luminous, as if Corenza were a jewel to be displayed rather than a woman to be known. But she said nothing. She stood and turned and held still when instructed, letting herself be dressed and arranged like a mannequin. This was part of the bargain. This was the price of salvation. Between fittings, Matilda dragged her through endless lessons in etiquette and protocol. how to address various ranks of nobility, how to enter and exit a room properly, how to manage servants, how to plan a menu for a dinner party of 40. "You'll have a housekeeper for most of this," Matilda assured her. "Mrs. Pembry has managed Ashworth House for 20 years. But you need to understand enough to oversee her, to make decisions when necessary. Does the Duke care about dinner menus? Theron cares about everything being done correctly." Matilda's expression softened. It's his way of maintaining control. After Father died, he became obsessed with order, with making sure nothing slipped through the cracks. "What was your father like?" The question emerged before Coincidental could stop it, but Matilda didn't seem to mind. If anything, her face lit up with the warmth of memory. He was wonderful, kind and funny, and completely devoted to us. Mother died when I was young, so I barely remember her, but Father made sure we never felt the lack. He read to us every night, took us riding in the park, let us eat sweets before dinner when Grandmother wasn't watching. She laughed softly. Theron was different then. Lighter. He used to laugh, actually laugh, not just that faint curve of his lips he does now. What changed? Father got sick. Matilda's voice dropped. It happened so fast. 1 week he was fine, and the next he was bedridden. The doctors couldn't explain it. Something in his blood, they said. Something they had never seen before. I'm sorry. Theron was in Scotland when it happened, visiting one of the northern estates. By the time he returned, she stopped, her eyes glistening. He didn't make it in time. Father died an hour before Theron's carriage arrived. The parallel to Edmund struck Coincidental with unexpected force. Another man who had died before someone who loved him could reach him. Another loss that left wounds too deep to fully heal. He blames himself, she said quietly. It was not a question. He shouldn't. But yes, he believes if he'd been here, if he'd seen the signs earlier, somehow he could have saved him. Matilda wiped her eyes with a quick, practiced motion. Grandmother believes the same thing, though she'd never admit it. She thinks someone poisoned Father, though there was never any proof. Poisoned. The word echoed in Coincidental's mind, connecting to the Dowager's warning about danger, about forces working against the family. "Matilda," she began, but the door opened, and Odette entered with news that Madame Forsyth needed another fitting, and the moment passed. That evening, unable to sleep, Coincidental found herself wandering the halls of Ashworth House. She had memorized the layout by now, or at least the parts she was permitted to access. The drawing room, the morning room, the gallery where the Dowager had delivered her warning, and the library, Theron's sanctuary. She had avoided it thus far, respecting his space, maintaining the careful distance that defined their arrangement. But tonight, drawn by restlessness and curiosity, she found herself standing before its heavy oak doors. Candlelight flickered beneath the threshold. He was inside. She should leave, return to her rooms, maintain the boundaries. Instead, she knocked. A pause. Then, enter. The library was everything Matilda had described and more. Books lined every wall, floor to ceiling, leather spines in every color. A fire crackled in the hearth, and Theron sat behind a massive desk, papers spread before him, quill in hand. He looked up as she entered, and something passed across his features. Not surprise exactly, but something close. "Miss Ashford, it's late." "I couldn't sleep." She moved further into the room, drawn by the warmth of the fire. "I apologize for interrupting." "You're not interrupting." He set down his quill, leaning back in his chair. "I was simply reviewing estate accounts. They can wait." She wandered toward the nearest bookshelf, trailing her fingers along the spines. Philosophy, poetry, history, natural science, the collected wisdom of centuries gathered in one room. "Your sister told me about your father," she said quietly. Behind her, the Duke went still. "Did she?" She said he was kind, that he used to read to you. Coincidental pulled a volume from the shelf, Keats, worn with use. She said you were different before he died. Matilda talks too much. She loves you. That's not the same thing. Silence. Coincidental turned to face him, the book still in her hands. In the firelight, his severity softened somehow. He looked tired. Human. Vulnerable in a way she had not seen before. Why did you really choose me? She asked. The question hung between them. He could deflect. He could dismiss her. He could retreat behind that wall of cold calculation that seemed to define him. Instead, he stood and moved toward the fire, presenting her with his profile. My father believed in love, he said finally. He married my mother, against everyone's advice because he loved her. When she died, that love became his anchor, his purpose. He never stopped loving her, even though she was gone. That sounds beautiful. It was. And it was also weakness. He turned to face her, firelight casting shadows across his features. His devotion to her memory left him vulnerable. Open. When his enemies moved against him, he didn't see it coming because he was looking backward instead of forward. Enemies? Someone poisoned him. The words came out flat, final, slowly, over months. By the time we realized, it was too late. And we still don't know who did it, or why. Coincidental felt the blood drain from her face. The Dowager mentioned danger. She said forces are working against your family. They are. Whoever killed my father may be targeting me next, which is why I need a wife before the season ends. His gray eyes met hers. Not for companionship, not for affection, for protection. How does a wife protect you? Because I need an heir. The words dropped like stones into still water. Without a clear succession, I remain vulnerable. My cousin Winthrop stands next in line, and he would sell this family to the highest bidder without a second thought. But if I marry, if I produce an heir, the succession becomes secure. My enemies lose their leverage. The calculation of it stole her breath. He had chosen her not because she was brave or interesting or anything of value. He had chosen her because she was desperate enough to accept a loveless marriage that would bind her to a family marked for destruction. You're using me, she said slowly. I'm using us both. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. I didn't choose you at random, Coincidental. Edmund Hale worked for me before his trading venture. He was investigating my father's death. That's why I funded his voyage. I thought he might find answers abroad. The revelation crashed over her like cold water. Edmund was working for you? He was. And someone found out. That's why his venture failed so spectacularly. That's why he died. Theron's jaw tightened. They killed him, just as they killed my father. And when I realized you were connected to him, that you had signed those documents without knowing what Edmund was truly involved in, you thought I might be useful. Coincidental's voice came out hollow. Another piece on the board. I thought you might be the key to understanding what Edmund discovered. But then, I met you. A change passed over his features, something she could not name. And I realized you were something more. Something I hadn't anticipated. What's that? He reached out, his fingers brushing the cover of the Keats book she still held. Brave, he said softly. Honest. Stubborn. Alive in a way I haven't felt in years. His eyes met hers. You make me want to believe in things I stopped believing in a long time ago. The air between them grew thick with something dangerous and electric. This is still an arrangement, Coincidental whispered. A transaction. Yes. He withdrew his hand slowly. But perhaps it doesn't have to remain only that. She stared at him, her heart pounding against her ribs. He was offering something she hadn't expected. A possibility. An opening. A chance for this cage to become something else entirely. We barely know each other, she said. Then let us remedy that. He moved to a shelf behind his desk, pulling down a slim volume. My father's favorite. He read it to me the night before he died. He placed the book in her hands. She looked down at the title embossed in gold. Dante's Inferno. Your father read you about hell. He read me about a man who journeyed through darkness to find light. A flicker of amusement softened his features. He said the descent was necessary for the ascent, that you cannot appreciate heaven without understanding what lies below. Coincidental held the book carefully, feeling its weight, its history, the hands that had held it before her. Is this a gift? A loan? His eyes held hers. Until you decide whether you trust me enough to accept gifts. She should leave, return to her room, maintain the walls that kept her safe. Instead, she sat in the chair by the fire, opened the book, and began to read. Theron returned to his desk, his quill resuming its scratch across paper. They remained that way for hours, silence between them, but not emptiness. Two people orbiting each other in the flickering firelight, learning to share space. Learning, perhaps, to share something more. When Coincidental finally returned to her room, the first gray light of dawn was creeping through the windows. She placed Dante beside the bed and lay down, her mind swimming with revelations. Edmund had been murdered. The Duke's father had been poisoned. Someone was hunting this family, and in 4 days, she would marry into the center of the storm. She should be terrified. Instead, she felt something entirely unexpected. She felt alive. The wedding was nothing like Coincidental had imagined as a girl. There were no flowers from her mother's garden, no village church with familiar faces in the pews, no groom who looked at her with love shining in his eyes. Instead, there was St. George's Hanover Square, its soaring columns and cold marble filled with London's most powerful families. There were hundreds of strangers watching her walk down the aisle in ivory silk and gold embroidery. And there was Theron, standing at the altar in black formal wear, his expression as unreadable as ever. But when she reached him, when she placed her trembling hand in his steady one, something passed between them. A flicker of warmth in those winter-gray eyes. An almost imperceptible squeeze of his fingers around hers. You came, he murmured, too low for anyone else to hear. Did you think I wouldn't? I thought you might realize the madness of this and flee. The madness is all I have left. She met his gaze steadily. Besides, I've never been one to flee. That half-smile she was beginning to recognize crossed his features again. Then the bishop began to speak, and Coincidental Ashford became the Duchess of Ashworth. The wedding breakfast passed in a blur of toasts and congratulations, most of them delivered with thinly veiled skepticism. Coincidental felt the weight of every sideways glance, every whispered comment hidden behind fans and champagne glasses. She was the nobody who had captured a duke, the fortune hunter, the upstart. She could read the judgment in their eyes as clearly as words on a page, but she held her head high, smiled graciously, and pretended not to notice. Matilda stayed close, providing running commentary on the guests in cheerful whispers. That's Lady Whitmore. Terrible gossip, but her husband controls half the shipping in Bristol, so everyone tolerates her. The woman in yellow is Mrs. Cavendish. She tried to match her daughter with Theron last season. The daughter eloped with a music teacher instead. Delicious scandal. And her? Coincidental tilted her head toward a striking blonde woman in pale rose silk, who had been staring at them with undisguised hostility for the past hour. Matilda's expression flickered. Lady Lavinia Pemberton. The woman the dowager had wanted Theron to marry. The one with the fortune and connections and impeccable breeding that Coincidental lacked. She doesn't look pleased. She's furious. She thought she had Theron secured. Everyone did. Matilda's voice dropped lower. Be careful with her, Coincidental. Lavinia doesn't take rejection well, and she has powerful friends. As if summoned by the warning, Lady Lavinia began moving toward them, her rose silk rustling with every deliberate step. "Your Grace." She curtsied to Coincidental with exaggerated formality. How delightful to finally meet the mysterious woman who captured Ashworth's attention so suddenly. The emphasis on suddenly was deliberate, pointed. "Lady Lavinia," Coincidental kept her voice pleasant. "I've heard so much about you." "Have you? How interesting. I confess I had heard nothing of you at all, until the engagement was announced." Her blue eyes swept over Coincidental's gown with barely concealed disdain. "Quite the whirlwind romance, wasn't it? Some might call it suspicious. Some might call it fate." Theron's voice came from behind Coincidental, his hand settling at the small of her back with proprietary warmth. "Lady Lavinia, how kind of you to congratulate my wife." The temperature around them dropped several degrees. Of course, Lavinia's smile turned brittle. "I wish you both every happiness, though I do hope the Duchess understands what she's married into. The Ashworth legacy is not for the faint of heart." "My wife is many things," Theron replied, his voice soft but edged with steel. "Faint of heart is not among them." Lavinia's eyes flashed with something dangerous. "We shall see." She swept away, leaving the threat hanging in the air like smoke. "She's going to be a problem," Coincidental murmured. "Yes." Theron's hand pressed more firmly against her back. "But not one you'll face alone." The Ashworth ball was tradition. Every new duchess was presented to society at a grand ball held within a fortnight of the wedding. It was a declaration of status, a display of wealth, and, Coincidental understood now, a battlefield where alliances were forged or destroyed. She stood at the top of the grand staircase, Theron beside her, looking down at the glittering assembly below. Hundreds of candles blazed in crystal chandeliers. An orchestra played from the gallery, and every eye in the room was fixed on her. "Ready?" Theron asked quietly. "No." She placed her hand on his arm. "But I've learned that readiness is a luxury I cannot afford." They descended together. The crowd parted before them like the sea before Moses. Coincidental felt the pressure of all those watching eyes, the judgment, the curiosity, the barely concealed hostility from certain quarters. "The Duchess of Ashworth," someone announced, and a ripple of whispers followed in their wake. The first dance was theirs by tradition. Theron led her to the center of the floor as the orchestra began a waltz. His hand at her waist was warm and steady. His eyes never left hers. "You're doing beautifully," he murmured as they turned. "I'm terrified." "It doesn't show." His grip tightened slightly. "Remember what I told you. These people respect strength. Show them you belong here, and eventually they'll believe it. And if I don't believe it myself, then pretend until you do." Something softened in his expression. "You've been pretending your entire life, Coincidental. Pretending poverty didn't sting. Pretending Edmund's love was enough. Pretending you didn't deserve more than you were given. This is just another performance." The accuracy of his assessment stole her breath. "You see too much," she whispered. "I see you." His voice dropped lower, intimate despite the hundreds watching. Perhaps more clearly than anyone ever has. The waltz ended. They parted with proper formality. But something had shifted between them, some invisible barrier growing thinner. The rest of the evening was a gauntlet of introductions and conversations. Coincidental danced with earls and viscounts, making small talk while their wives assessed her from the sidelines. She complimented gowns she didn't care about, and expressed interest in horses she would never ride. She smiled until her face ached, and curtsied until her knees protested. And through it all, she felt Theron's presence like a compass point, always aware of where he was in the room, always catching his glance across the crowd. It was during the supper dance that Lady Lavinia made her move. Coincidental had stepped onto the terrace for air, needing a moment away from the suffocating press of bodies and expectations. The night was cool, the gardens below silver with moonlight. She heard the footsteps behind her too late. "Enjoying your triumph, Your Grace?" Lavinia emerged from the shadows, her rose silk replaced by deep burgundy that made her look like a wound against the darkness. "Lady Lavinia," Coincidental kept her voice steady. "I wasn't aware we had anything further to discuss." "Oh, but we do." Lavinia moved closer, her smile sharp as broken glass. "You see, I've been making inquiries about you, about your family, about your conveniently deceased fiancé." Coincidental's stomach dropped. Edmund Hale. Lavinia savored the name like poison. A nobody from nowhere who somehow borrowed £12,000 from one of the richest men in England, and then died before he could repay it, leaving you, his devoted fiancé, conveniently positioned to catch the Duke's attention. "You don't know what you're talking about, don't I?" Lavinia stepped closer still, her voice dropping to a hiss. "I know desperation when I see it. I know a scheme when I smell one. And I know that whatever hold you have over Ashworth, it won't last. There is no hold. There is no scheme. Then why did he choose you?" Lavinia's composure cracked, revealing something raw and ugly beneath. "I did everything right. I was perfect for him. Perfect. And he looked through me like I was glass. Then you appear from nowhere, and suddenly he's proposing within a week? Perhaps he simply didn't love you." The word struck like a slap. Lavinia's face contorted with fury. "Love? You think this is about love? How charmingly naive." She leaned in, her breath hot against Coincidental's cheek. "This is about power, you foolish girl. And you have none. The moment I discover what secret binds you to Ashworth, I will destroy you both. You'll find nothing." Coincidental forced strength into her voice. "Because there is nothing to find." "We'll see." Lavinia pulled back, her mask of civility sliding back into place. "Enjoy your evening, Your Grace. Enjoy every moment of this borrowed life. It won't last." She vanished back into the ballroom, leaving Coincidental shaking on the terrace. "Coincidental." She spun to find Theron emerging from the shadows on the opposite side of the terrace. His expression was thunderous. "How much did you hear?" "Enough." He crossed to her in 3 quick strides, his hands gripping her shoulders. "Are you all right?" "I'm fine," but her voice trembled. "She suspects something. She's going to investigate." "Let her investigate." His grip tightened. "She'll find nothing that connects you to anything improper. Edmund's involvement with me was carefully hidden. The debt is forgiven and documented as a wedding gift from a family friend. There is no trail for her to follow. She's dangerous, Theron. So am I." His gray eyes blazed with intensity. "No one threatens my wife. No one. My wife." The word sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. "You're shaking," he observed, his voice softening. "It's cold." "It's not cold." He pulled her closer, his body blocking the wind. "You're frightened. I told you. I'm fine. And I told you once that you were brave." His hand rose to cup her cheek, his thumb brushing across her skin. "Brave enough to face down my grandmother. Brave enough to accept an impossible proposal. Brave enough to stand in that ballroom and pretend you belonged. Pretending is exhausting. I know." His forehead touched hers, his breath warm against her lips. "But you don't have to pretend with me. Not anymore." The moment suspended between them, fragile as spun glass. Then voices spilled from the ballroom doors, and they stepped apart just as a group of guests emerged onto the terrace. "Your Grace," someone called. "We've been looking everywhere. The next dance is about to begin." Coincidental smoothed her gown, composing herself. When she looked at Theron, his mask was back in place. But something had changed. Something had begun. 3 weeks into her marriage, Coincidental realized she was in danger. Not from Lavinia's threats, or the mysterious enemies hunting the Ashworth family, those dangers she understood, those she could prepare for. No, this danger was far worse. She was falling in love with her husband. It had happened gradually, in stolen moments, and quiet evenings. In the library where they read together by firelight. In the breakfast room, where he saved her the last pastry without being asked. In the garden, where he pointed out the roses his mother had planted, and spoke of her with such tenderness that Coincidental's heart ached. He was not the cold, calculating man she had first met in her family's parlor. That man had been armor, protection, a wall built to keep the world at bay. But behind the wall, there was someone else entirely. Someone who laughed at Matilda's terrible jokes. Someone who spent hours reviewing estate accounts to ensure every tenant was treated fairly. Someone who visited his father's grave every Sunday morning and stood there in silence, his grief too deep for words. Someone who looked at her sometimes with an expression she couldn't name but felt in her bones. "You're staring," he said one evening, glancing up from his correspondence. Coincidental startled, nearly dropping the book she'd been pretending to read. "I was thinking." "About? About whether you ever actually finish working, or if the papers simply multiply when no one's watching." That familiar hint of warmth at the corner of his mouth again. "They multiply. It's a curse passed down through generations of dukes." She laughed despite herself, and his expression grew fractionally warmer. This was the danger. These moments, this ease, the way he made her feel seen and safe, and something she hadn't felt since Edmund's death. Hopeful. "Coincidental." His voice had shifted, grown serious. "There's something I need to tell you." She set down her book, her pulse quickening. "What is it?" "Lavinia has been making inquiries, as she threatened. So far, she's found nothing damaging. But—" he hesitated, which was unlike him. "She's been seen with my cousin Winthrop." The name landed like a blow. "Your cousin? The one who inherits if I die without an heir, yes." Theron's jaw tightened. "Winthrop has always resented me. He believed he should have inherited directly, that my father somehow cheated him out of his birthright. And now he's aligned himself with the woman I publicly rejected." "You think they're working together?" "I think Lavinia wants revenge, and Winthrop wants power, and together, they are dangerous." He stood, moving to stare into the fire. "I should have told you sooner. You deserved to know what you were marrying into. You told me there was danger. You told me your father was murdered. I didn't tell you that I suspect my own family." He turned to face her, his expression haunted. "Winthrop was at the house the night my father fell ill. He had access. He had motive. And when I started investigating, evidence began disappearing. Witnesses became unreachable. It was like fighting smoke." Coincidental rose, crossing to stand before him. "Why didn't you go to the authorities?" "With what? Suspicions? A grieving son's paranoia?" His laugh was bitter. "I have no proof, only certainty I cannot explain, and enemies I cannot name." "So you married me?" Understanding dawned slowly. To secure the succession, to take away Winthrop's motive, to protect everything my father built, everything he died for. His eyes met hers, and to give myself time to find the proof I need. She should feel used. She should feel angry that he had manipulated her into a marriage based on strategy rather than sentiment. Instead, she felt only an overwhelming desire to help him. "Then let me help you find it." His brow furrowed. "What?" "The proof. Let me help." She stepped closer, her hands finding his. "I'm your wife, your partner in this, whether you intended it or not, and I am tired of being protected. I want to fight." Something blazed in his eyes, surprise, admiration, and something deeper, something that made her breath catch. "You continue to astonish me," he murmured. "Is that a yes?" "It's a—" He stopped, his gaze dropping to her lips. The air between them grew thick with possibility. Coincidental. Her name was barely a whisper on his lips. Yes? He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle despite the intensity in his eyes. I didn't expect this. When I proposed, when I made this arrangement, I didn't expect. What? You. His thumb traced her cheekbone. I didn't expect you to matter. Her heart stopped, then restarted at twice its normal speed. Theron. He kissed her. Not the chaste, formal kiss they had exchanged at their wedding. This was something else entirely. His mouth moved against hers with a hunger that stole her breath, his hands tangling in her hair as he pulled her closer. She kissed him back with equal fervor, her fingers gripping the lapels of his coat, her body pressed against his as the world narrowed to this moment. This man, this impossible feeling that filled her chest to bursting. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. This changes things, she whispered. Yes. His forehead rested against hers. Everything. What do we do now? He was silent for a long moment. Then his arms tightened around her. Now, he said quietly, we stop pretending this is only an arrangement. She looked up at him, searching his face for doubt, for calculation, for any sign that this was another performance. She found only honesty. I didn't expect you either, she admitted. I didn't expect to feel, what? She swallowed hard. The admission was terrifying. The admission was everything. Safe, she whispered. I didn't expect to feel safe. Something cracked in his expression, something vulnerable and raw. I will keep you safe, he said fiercely. Whatever comes, whatever enemies rise against us, I swear it, Coincidental. On my father's grave, I swear it. She believed him. That was the most terrifying part of all. The letter arrived 3 days later. Coincidental was in the morning room with Matilda, reviewing invitations for an upcoming dinner, when a footman entered with a sealed envelope on a silver tray. For the Duchess, he said, delivered by private courier. The man would not give his name. Coincidental's blood chilled as she took the envelope. The paper was expensive, the seal unmarked. Nothing about it should have felt threatening. Everything about it did. What is it? Matilda asked, leaning forward with curiosity. Coincidental broke the seal and unfolded the single page within. The words were printed in block letters, impossible to trace. Your brother's debts were not all forgiven. Felix Croft holds notes, worth £3,000. He will call them due in 1 week, unless you come to the address below. Alone. Tell no one, especially your husband, or Phineas will be in Newgate. By morning, below the threat was an address in one of London's less reputable districts. Coincidental? Matilda's voice seemed to come from very far away. You've gone pale. What does it say? Nothing. Coincidental folded the letter quickly, slipping it into her sleeve. Just news from home. My mother is unwell. I should write to her. The lie tasted like ash. She should tell Theron. She knew she should tell him. But the letter had been explicit. Tell no one. And Phineas, foolish, reckless Phineas, was trapped in a scheme she didn't understand, owing money to people she'd never heard of. How had she believed that Edmund's debts were the end of it? How had she been so naive? Felix Croft. Coincidental's mind raced. Not Gideon Croft, Phineas's drinking companion from the taverns. This was someone else entirely. Someone who had been waiting in the shadows, but the address was clear enough, and the deadline was absolute. 1 week. She spent 3 days wrestling with the decision. 3 days of sleepless nights and forced smiles, of dodging Theron's increasingly concerned questions about her mood. You're pulling away, he said on the third evening, catching her arm as she tried to retreat to her chambers after dinner. Something's wrong. Nothing's wrong. Another lie. They were becoming easier. That terrified her. Coincidental. His voice dropped, soft and serious. "After everything we've shared, do you truly expect me to believe that?" She met his eyes and felt her resolve crack. Tell him. Trust him. Let him help. But the letter had been clear, and she had seen what happened to Edmund when he got too close to dangerous people. She would not risk Theron. She would not risk this fragile thing growing between them. "I'm tired," she said. "That's all. The season has been exhausting." He studied her for a long moment, his gray eyes searching her face. She watched him decide whether to push or retreat. He retreated. "Very well." His hand released her arm. "But know this. Whatever is troubling you, you don't have to face it alone." The kindness in his voice nearly broke her. "I know," she whispered. "Good night, Theron." She fled before he could see her tears. On the 4th day, she went to the address. She told Odette she was visiting her mother. She told the coachman to take her to Willow Lane, then dismissed him and hired a hackney cab for the rest of the journey. The address led to a building in Southwark, cramped and dark, its windows covered with grime, the kind of place respectable people never visited. Coincidental climbed the narrow stairs to the 2nd floor, her heart pounding, her hands trembling beneath her gloves. The door was already open. She stepped inside and froze, and Lady Lavinia Pemberton sat in a chair by the grimy window, dressed in elegant traveling clothes, completely at odds with their squalid surroundings. Beside her stood a man Coincidental had never seen before, tall and thin with calculating eyes. And in the corner, bound to a chair with a gag in his mouth, was Phineas. "Ah, Your Grace!" Lavinia's smile was triumphant. "So good of you to join us." "Let him go." Coincidental's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Whatever quarrel you have is with me, not him." "On the contrary, your brother is quite central to our quarrel." Lavinia rose, moving toward her with predatory grace. "You see, Phineas has been working for us for quite some time. Unwittingly, of course. He thought he was simply networking, making useful connections. But every debt he accumulated, every scheme he joined, created another thread we could pull. What do you want? What I've always wanted." Lavinia's mask of civility dropped entirely. Ashworth. The title, the estates, the power. Everything that should have been mine. Theron won't have a choice. The thin man spoke for the first time, his voice cold and precise. "Allow me to introduce myself. Felix Croft, your brother's most patient creditor." Coincidental's blood turned to ice. "The debts your husband so generously forgave were only part of your brother's obligations," Croft continued. "The rest he owes to me, and I am not so forgiving." "What do you want?" Coincidental repeated. "A simple signature." Lavinia produced a document from her reticule. "A confession. That you tricked the Duke into marriage through deception. That you concealed your brother's criminal debts and your own involvement in Edmund Hale's schemes. That's a lie. It doesn't matter if it's true. It only matters if it's believed." Lavinia's eyes glittered. "Once this document is made public, your marriage will be annulled. You'll be ruined. And Theron." Her voice softened with mock sympathy. "Poor, heartbroken Theron will need someone to comfort him. Someone suitable. Someone who understands his world. He'll never believe it. He won't have to. The courts will believe it. Society will believe it." Lavinia thrust the document toward her. "Sign, and your brother goes free. Refuse, and he hangs for the crimes we'll manufacture. Your choice, Your Grace." Phineas made a muffled sound behind his gag, his eyes wild with fear. Coincidental looked at the document, at her brother, at the woman who had orchestrated her destruction with such patient cruelty. She thought of Theron, of the way he'd looked at her in the library, of his promise to keep her safe, of everything she was about to lose. "I'll sign," she whispered. Lavinia's smile widened. Coincidental signed the confession at 3:30 in the afternoon. By 4, she was back in the hackney cab, numb with despair. By 5, she was standing in her mother's parlor in Willow Lane, explaining that she had made a terrible mistake and could not return to Ashworth House. By 6, a carriage bearing the Ashworth crest appeared at the end of the lane. And by 7, Theron himself was standing in her family's cramped parlor, his expression a storm of fury and hurt. "Tell me it's not true." His voice shook with barely contained emotion. "Tell me the confession Lavinia is circulating through every salon in London is a fabrication." Coincidental couldn't meet his eyes. "I can't. You can't, or you won't." "I signed it." The words tasted like poison. To save Phineas. They had him. They threatened to destroy him if I didn't. So you destroyed us instead. The words hit her like physical blows. "I was trying to protect you," she whispered. "To protect everyone. I didn't know what else to do. You could have told me." His composure finally shattered, his voice rising. "You could have trusted me. We could have faced this together. And if I'd come to you and Lavinia had followed through on her threats, Phineas would be in prison. The scandal would have touched you regardless. At least this way. What? You sacrifice yourself? You let them win?" He stepped toward her, his hands gripping her shoulders. "Do you truly understand what you've done? That confession is already spreading through society. By morning, every door in London will be closed to you. The marriage can be annulled. You will have nothing." "I know." "Then why?" She finally met his eyes, and he saw the tears streaming down her face. "Because I love you," she said. "And loving you means I can't let you be destroyed by your association with me. This way, you're free. You can denounce me, annul the marriage, and move forward with your life." "I don't want to be free." The words exploded from him. He stopped. His hands fell from her shoulders. Something in his expression closed off, retreating behind the cold mask she hadn't seen since their first meeting. "I want what clearly does not exist," he finished quietly. "A wife who trusts me. A partnership built on honesty." "Theron, don't." He stepped back. "The Dowager will handle the annulment proceedings. Your family will be provided for, as I promised. But this," he gestured between them, "this is over." He turned and walked out of the parlor, out of the house, out of her life. Coincidental sank to her knees on the worn carpet and wept. The scandal was everything Lavinia had promised. Within 2 days, Coincidental's name was poison. The woman who had deceived a duke, the fortune hunter who had schemed her way into nobility, the imposter who had finally been exposed. She stayed with her mother, avoiding windows, avoiding neighbors, avoiding the pitying looks from people who had once envied her impossible rise. Phineas had been released, shaken, but unharmed. He tried to apologize a dozen times, but Coincidental couldn't bear to hear it. His foolishness had been the thread that unraveled everything. But the fault was hers. She had signed that confession. She had made the choice. On the 3rd day, Matilda came. She arrived in a plain carriage without the Ashworth crest, dressed simply, her usually bright expression drawn with worry. "Don't," Coincidental said before Matilda could speak. "Don't try to comfort me. I don't deserve it." "You deserve the truth." Matilda pushed past her into the parlor. "Which is why I'm here." "What truth?" "That my brother has been absolutely unbearable since he left you." Matilda's voice cracked with emotion. "He won't eat. He won't sleep. He's locked himself in the library, refusing to see anyone, and he keeps reading that wretched Dante book you left behind." The book? She had forgotten about the book. "He made his feelings clear," Coincidental said quietly. "He made his hurt clear. That's not the same thing." Matilda grabbed her hands. "You broke his heart, Coincidental. But a broken heart can be mended. What can't be mended is a life spent wondering what might have been." He said it was over. Men say many things when they're wounded. Matilda's grip tightened. The question is, do you love him? The answer rose in her chest, undeniable and absolute. Yes, Coincidental whispered. God help me, yes. Then fight for him. Matilda's eyes blazed. Don't let Lavinia win. Don't let fear and pride destroy what you built together. How? He won't see me. The confession is a fabrication, and everyone who matters knows it. Matilda pulled out a folded document. While Theron was wallowing, I was investigating. Felix Croft is an alias. The real Felix Croft died 3 years ago in debtor's prison. The man you met was an actor, hired by Lavinia, and paid by— She paused dramatically. Winthrop Vane. The name crashed through Coincidental's despair. Winthrop. Theron's cousin. The one who inherits if the marriage is dissolved and Theron dies without an heir. Matilda's expression hardened. They've been working together for months. Lavinia wanted revenge. Winthrop wanted power. And they nearly succeeded. Hope flickered in Coincidental's chest, dangerous and desperate. But the confession is worthless without corroborating evidence. And the only evidence they had was your brother's debts, which Theron already forgave. Matilda smiled grimly. Lavinia overplayed her hand. The confession is dramatic, but it proves nothing except that you were desperate to save your family. That's not a crime. That's devotion. Does Theron know this? Not yet. He's been too busy brooding to listen. Matilda pressed the document into Coincidental's hands. Which is why you need to tell him yourself. Tonight. Before the Winterbourne ball. The ball is still happening. Grandmother insisted. She said canceling would be an admission of defeat. Matilda's smile grew warmer. She also said that if you wanted to reclaim your place, you should do it publicly, dramatically, in a way that leaves no room for doubt. The dowager, the woman who had threatened to destroy her, was now offering her a path back. Why would she help me? Because she watched Theron these past 3 days, and she finally understood. Matilda's voice softened. He loves you, Coincidental. Even grandmother can see it. And she would rather have a duke who loves unsuitably than a duke who doesn't love at all. The tears came before Coincidental could stop them. I don't know if I can face them all. The whispers, the judgment. You faced them before. You can face them again. Matilda squeezed her hands one final time. The question is, are you brave enough to try? Coincidental thought of Theron in the firelit library, telling her she was brave. Thought of his kiss, fierce and tender. Thought of everything she had gained and lost, and might gain again if she had the courage to reach for it. Yes, she said, I am. The Winterbourne ball was in full swing when Coincidental arrived. She wore the deep green velvet Madame Forsyth had made for her wedding dinner. The gown she had never worn because she had fled before the dinner occurred. Odette had appeared at Willow Lane that afternoon, with it carefully packed, along with the pearls Matilda had loaned her, and a note in the dowager's precise hand. Make them remember why he chose you. The footman announced her at the top of the stairs. The Duchess of Ashworth. Every head in the ballroom turned. Whispers exploded like wildfire. Fans fluttered with frantic speed. Coincidental lifted her chin and descended. She felt their eyes on her, curious, hostile, gleeful at the prospect of witnessing her humiliation. Lavinia stood near the refreshment table, her expression flickering from shock to fury as Coincidental appeared. And across the ballroom, standing frozen by the fireplace, was Theron. He looked terrible, pale, drawn, shadows beneath his eyes. But when their gazes met, something blazed to life in his expression. Something that looked like hope. Coincidental walked straight toward him, ignoring the whispers, ignoring the stares, ignoring everything except the man she had married and nearly lost. "Your Grace," she said when she reached him, "I believe we need to talk." "Here?" His voice was rough. "Now? Unless you'd prefer to continue hiding in libraries." Wry humor flickered in his eyes. "You've been speaking to Matilda." She had some interesting information to share. Coincidental pulled out the document. "About Felix Croft, about your cousin, about the conspiracy that was designed to destroy us both." Theron took the document, his eyes scanning the contents. As understanding dawned, his expression shifted from confusion to fury. "Winthrop," he breathed. "Working with Lavinia. The confession was coerced. The debts were manufactured. Everything," her voice caught, "everything was designed to tear us apart. And you believed leaving me was the only way to protect me. I was wrong." The words came out thick with emotion. "I should have trusted you. I should have come to you the moment I received that letter. Instead, I let fear make my decisions, and it nearly cost us everything." The ballroom had gone quiet around them. Everyone was watching now, straining to hear. Theron set down the document slowly. When he looked at her, his mask was completely gone. "You hurt me," he said quietly. "More than I thought possible. I know. I told you once that loving something means giving it the power to destroy you. I remember. You have that power now." He stepped closer, his voice dropping to a murmur. "The question is, what will you do with it?" Coincidental's heart hammered against her ribs. "Love you," she whispered, "properly this time, without secrets, without fear, without running away when things become difficult. Even knowing what we face, Winthrop won't stop. Lavinia won't either. Let them come." Coincidental lifted her chin. "I am the Duchess of Ashworth. I will stand beside my husband, and together we will face whatever storms arise." For a long moment, Theron simply looked at her. Then he smiled. A real smile, warm and bright, and everything she had been afraid she would never see again. "Together," he repeated. "Together." He took her hand and raised it to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles with deliberate formality. "Then I believe, Your Grace, that you owe me a dance." The orchestra, as if sensing the shift in atmosphere, struck up a waltz. Theron led her to the center of the floor. The crowd parted before them, whispers transforming into something else. Wonder, perhaps, or begrudging respect. They danced, and this time there was no performance, no pretense. Only two people who had found each other through chaos and nearly lost each other to fear, moving together with perfect synchronicity. "Lavinia is leaving," Coincidental murmured, catching a glimpse of burgundy silk retreating toward the doors. "Let her go. We'll deal with her tomorrow." "And Winthrop?" "Him too." Theron's grip tightened at her waist. "Tonight is ours. Everything else can wait." The waltz ended. They stood in the center of the ballroom, surrounded by hundreds of witnesses. And then Theron did something that made every jaw in the room drop. He kissed her. Not a polite, formal kiss. A real kiss, deep and fierce, and utterly improper for a public setting. When they finally broke apart, the ballroom erupted, some gasping, some applauding, and some simply staring in disbelief. "Well," the dowager's voice cut through the chaos, dry as parchment. "I suppose that settles the question of whether the marriage will continue." Coincidental turned to find the older woman watching them with an expression that might, just might, have contained a hint of approval. "Your Grace," Coincidental said, curtsying. "Your Grace," the dowager returned, nodding. "Well played. You've given them a story they'll be telling for years." "I wasn't thinking about stories." "No." The dowager's eyes softened almost imperceptibly. "I don't suppose you were." The scandal transformed overnight. No longer was Coincidental the deceiver, the fortune hunter, the imposter exposed. Now she was the devoted wife who had sacrificed her reputation to save her family. The romantic heroine who had won back her husband's love against impossible odds. The confession was quietly forgotten. Winthrop fled London 3 days after the ball, his involvement with Lavinia exposed by the document Matilda had uncovered. Lady Lavinia herself retreated to the countryside, her social standing shattered beyond repair. And Coincidental found herself, against all probability, exactly where she belonged. 6 months later, on a winter evening much like the one when they had first met, Theron found her in the library. She was reading by the fire. Dante, the book he had given her, worn now with repeated reading. She looked up as he entered, a smile crossing her face. "You're supposed to be reviewing estate accounts. The accounts can wait." He moved toward her, something hidden behind his back. "I have something for you." "Another book? Something else?" He knelt before her chair, and her breath caught at the intensity in his gray eyes. "I never did this properly. When I proposed, it was a transaction, a bargain. I offered you salvation in exchange for your freedom. Theron, let me finish." He produced a small velvet box, opening it to reveal a ring, not the formal diamond she'd been given at their wedding, but something simpler. A band of gold set with a single emerald that matched her eyes. "This was my mother's," he said quietly. "My father had it made for her when he proposed. He told me once that he'd known from the moment he met her that she would change his life." Coincidental's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know when I met you," Theron continued. "I thought I was simply finding a solution to a problem. But you became so much more. You made me want to live again, to feel again, to believe that love wasn't weakness, but strength." "It is strength," she whispered. "I know that now." He slipped the ring onto her finger, where it settled beside her wedding band. "Coincidental Ashford Vane, Duchess of Ashworth, my wife, my partner, my heart. Will you do me the honor of remaining married to me? Not because of contracts or arrangements, but because you choose to?" The tears spilled over, running down her cheeks. "Yes," she said. 1,000 times. Yes. He rose and kissed her, gentle and fierce all at once, and she wrapped her arms around him and held on. Later, much later, they sat together by the fire, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. "There's something else," he said quietly. "Something I've been waiting to tell you." "What?" "We found the proof, against Winthrop, a letter in his own hand, admitting to poisoning my father. He'll be tried for murder." Coincidental sat up, staring at him. "When?" 3 days ago. I wanted to tell you properly, when we were alone." His expression softened. "It's over, Coincidental. Finally. Truly over. Justice will be done." The weight she hadn't realized she was carrying lifted from her shoulders. "Your father would be proud of you," she whispered. "I hope so." His voice caught. "I hope he knows that I finally listened, that I chose love over duty, that I found someone worth fighting for." "You did." She cupped his face in her hands, pressing her forehead to his. "And I found someone worth staying for." They remained that way for a long moment, breathing together, hearts beating in synchronicity. Then Coincidental laughed softly. "Do you know what I was thinking when you first appeared in my mother's parlor? That I was the most arrogant man you'd ever met. That you had the coldest eyes I'd ever seen." She traced the corner of his eye with her fingertip. "I was wrong. Were you? Your eyes aren't cold at all. They're just waiting for the right person to see what's behind them." He kissed her again, slow and sweet. "You saw," he murmured against her lips. "I saw." Outside the library windows, snow began to fall on London, covering the city in white. Inside, the Duke and Duchess of Ashworth sat together by the fire, wrapped in warmth and love, and the certain knowledge that whatever storms might come, they would face them together. Always together. 1 year later, on the anniversary of their wedding, Carenza found herself in the library, the same library where she had first seen Theron vulnerable, the same chair by the fire where she had read Dante while he worked, the same room where everything had begun to change between them. She was reading by firelight when exhaustion crept over her, a particular kind of tiredness that carried its own secret joy. She let her head drift to the armrest, her eyes growing heavy, and did not hear Theron enter until he lifted her gently and carried her to the settee. "You're falling asleep," he murmured, settling beside her. "It's tradition." She smiled without opening her eyes. "This is where I first realized I could trust you." His arms tightened around her. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. "I love you too." She let herself drift, safe in the arms of the man who had once offered her a bargain and ended up giving her everything. The fire crackled softly, snow fell outside the windows, and in the warmth of their sanctuary, the Duke and Duchess of Ashworth held each other close. Their story had begun with devastation. It had bloomed into something extraordinary, and it proved, beyond any doubt, that sometimes the best things begin with an ending.